Welcome to Unfiltered and Elevated, the show where we ditch the small talk and have real conversations with inspiring guests. Today, I have Trevor Rose here as our guest, and I'm your host, Carlos Berrigan. Our guest today, Trevor Rose, isn't your typical lawyer. Born and raised in Napa Valley, his family has been here for over a century. Trevor's journey wasn't always destined for the courtroom. He first explored his passion for language, both Spanish and music, earning Phi Beta Kappa honors at UC Berkeley. Then a year spent in Barcelona further solidified his fluency in Spanish, but there was another calling pulling at Trevor, the desire to advocate and serve. So welcome to the podcast, Trevor, and just give me a quick breakdown of your life and how you got to where you're at right now.
Well, I'll do my best to distill and summarize almost 39 years in 30 minutes, but I'll try to give you some highlights and maybe some lowlights too, because I think that's probably good for people to hear too. I did start here in Napa, and then after high school, I went to UC Berkeley, and actually, I think this is kind of an interesting story because preparing for this or even getting ready to go on to do this podcast, I actually spent some time reflecting on just how I got to where I got. And I think that's actually good for everybody to do sometimes. And I think in large part, I got to where I got because I had a roommate in my second year of college who was a military brat. And he grew up all over the world. His dad was in the Navy. And he invited me to go spend the Christmas break with his family in Catania, which is in Sicily, little island off the coast of Italy. So that was the first time I ever left the U.S., like on a trip, was in college. Long story short, I ended up meeting some very interesting people on the trip, and I got the bug to reestablish my interest in language, which I did a lot. I studied a lot of Spanish in high school, and then at that point I had majored in music my first year, and I decided to add a second major, which was Spanish literature, language, all that good stuff. So basically, at the end of that, I graduated from Berkeley, and at the time, my girlfriend, not my wife, so definitely an ex, but an important part of my journey. She used to joke with me and say, "What are you going to do when you graduate from college? Like with these majors, you've got music and Spanish. Are you just going to play the guitar and sing songs in Spanish in a bus station? Like, how are you going to make a living doing this?" And I said, okay, well, that's a good point. Duly noted. Maybe I will consider doing something else. What do you think? And she said, why don't you just go take the LSAT, which was the entrance exam to become a lawyer. So I then spent the next 6 months studying every single day for the LSAT, taking practice exams, took the LSAT, got a good score, and all of a sudden that was what set my initial trajectory to become a lawyer, I think.
What really made you want to go into law, though? There's something that called you for, I want to be dealing with paperwork, courts, and helping people. And maybe you could tell guests a little bit about what type of law you practice and how you got into that field.
Yeah, I think initially it may not have been that deep when I first made the choice to go into law, other than it was a noble profession. It was something that nobody in my family had ever done. I thought that I was good with language. Logic is an important part of being a lawyer as well. So I thought it was something initially that I would be good at or had an opportunity to excel at, whether it's debating or using argument. And then fast forward, once you become a lawyer, and I think we can sort of put a pin in something for later that might be an interesting subject, which was after I actually passed the bar, I didn't go straight into law. I spent 2 years working in professional baseball before I got into opening up my own practice and becoming a proper lawyer. But the initial part of opening up my own practice was I was renting a 1 bedroom place here in Napa with my wife. We had just gotten married. It was 2013, and full disclosure, it was a rental that my parents had a partial ownership interest in. So they were giving us under market rent too to help us out. We just gotten married. I had tremendous amount of law school debt. I think maybe $75,000 or $80,000. And by the way, thank you to my parents because they picked up half the tab for law school, which was incredible. That was kind of our deal. And they paid for my undergraduate education. So that was a huge bonus, and it made things so much easier for me, and I'm very grateful for that. So my very first legal experience, I went to a law office where there was an attorney there. I just walked in one day and said, "Hey, I'm a new attorney. I'm going to open up my own shop. I have no idea what I'm doing." And he said, "Okay, I'll kind of agree to be your mentor." And I made this deal with the landlord where I basically paid $250 a month to be able to use the conference room. It was on Pearl Street, it was on Pearl Street in Coombs, kind of behind where Kohl's is. And there's this dark, cavernous, dungeon-looking place. It looked like it was from the 1960s. And I would try to get a client, maybe a referral from a friend or a family. I think that's what typically happens when you start out, is you have these people that come to kind of support you, and they're your guinea pigs, essentially. And you do it for very low cost. My very first real client, I remember doing the consultation, and I was so nervous. And it was a fixed fee matter, and it was going to be an immigration petition, a complicated one that I was going to help somebody with. And I had no other work. So I was like, I know I can spend all the time I need to get this done and do it the right way. And I gave her the quote, and she agreed. We said, okay, we're going to move forward. And that night, my wife and I were like, oh my gosh, this is like 2 months worth of rent that we just paid. Like we went and celebrated. I think we went to Pizza Zero, and it was funny. So when you first start out, maybe this is similar to a contractor or handyman, but you take anything that comes through the door, and you're not picky because you need income. You need to make money. And you don't know if it's going to be 1 day or 2 weeks before you get a phone call. So in the industry, we kind of joke and we call that, like there's a state law, there's business law, there's immigration law. We call that rent law, which is anything to help pay the rent. So I did like real estate, I did immigration, I did a couple of DUI criminal defense cases. I did even a couple of divorce and custody cases, which was so hard and terrible. Man, I did everything, and I got a lot of base experience that first couple of years, which served me to know what I didn't like, and also what I was good at, and I helped narrow my specialty about a couple of years later.
So interesting. And I always thought about that. I always thought, how do attorneys decide what to focus all their efforts on? And I always thought like there must be a calling or whatever it is that makes people focus on a specific type of law. And it's kind of like for us, like same thing when we started, anything that came through our door, we're like, take it on, like perfect, like a job. We can get our name out. We can show the clients our experience and what we can do for them. And then with time goes by, you're like, all right, maybe I could do a little more of this stuff. We like doing this, or now you can get a little more selective. But I guess in law, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you need to know what you're defending or what you're helping your clients with, right? So you need to know what you're going to go into court and protect or defend or help. But it's so interesting that from like a place where you were at, and you just ended up, you met this person, you went to their office, and now you're now in an office and you're looking for work.
I think so. In 2013, we opened. In 2015, I remember sitting down, and by the way, my wife is amazing, even though she's not a lawyer, she's not licensed to practice, but we've always built this together. So maybe on paper, I'm the attorney, but it's always been our shared business, and we built it together. So when 2015 hit, about 2 years after we opened our doors, we looked and there was probably 8 different practice areas that we had received revenue from. We said, okay, this year we're going to make a decision that's hard, but it's going to be forward thinking, long term. We're going to sacrifice some short-term income in order to grow out our preferred specialty. And this year, we're only going to take on 3 different practice areas. So we're going to cut out the 5 that we don't want to do. So like year 1, I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but let's just pretend it was 100,000 was revenue, and year 2 was maybe 150. And then year 3, we said, you know what? Even if we don't grow, but we still hit 150, we're only doing these 3 areas, we're going to develop such an expertise that we're going to be able to expand that. And as you know, when you, like as a contractor, whatever the given type of work or specialty is, you get better at it. You get better at it. You get faster at it. The quality improves. Profitability improves, as well as reputation, because now all these things build on each other. And people in this day and age, I think the general practitioner or whatever, like that has gone by the wayside, and people look for specialists. Like even with doctors are similar. Like the foot specialist, the dermatologist for skin. Like you don't just go to a doctor and say, hey, I need a heart surgery. Like, okay, let's go to the cardiologist or the thoracic surgeon or whatever it is. So we focused on estates, which is basically wills and trusts, preparing people and their assets for how they want to get transferred in the event of death or other types of succession. Business. So we focused on business law, small business, which was mostly people that were starting out a business and they wanted to form a corporation or an LLC and get off the ground. And also a part of that was even representing people that were selling businesses that were getting out of their career and wanting to transfer and monetize what they've created and retire. And then the last one was real estate, but it was basically the first 2 and then a little bit the third one. Because real estate, we didn't want to handle disputes between neighbors and things like that. We wanted to specialize in things that overlapped with the estate and the business part, which was title, deeds, transfer of real estate, and that kind of stuff. So that worked. And then in 2018, when I was eligible with the state bar, I got certified as a specialist in trust, estates, and probate. If they go through this rigorous examination, background check, all this other stuff. Of course, I was a little bit worried about the background check, but all that. No, I was kidding. I passed, so I gave them the right names to talk to for references. Yeah, so I guess that takes us up to 2018, and I'll let you decide where you want to take this from here.
And so one of the questions I have is, what's one of your biggest errors you've made in your career?
Good question. If you ask my wife, I probably make an error every single day, multiple mistakes. I mean, I think you used the word error. I like to think about maybe mistakes. I know they're kind of different, but as far as an error, maybe.
And really, I meant failure.
Yeah.
And I meant what's a big failure you've dealt with that's something really big that you're like, I wish this wouldn't have happened. But the reason why I asked that is because every time we go through a failure, it's actually good. We learn what not to do. We learn what to do. We learn to put things in place. Every time a massive error has happened with us, we've learned something to do better. So I see like a failure as a lesson learned and something to improve on. But what would you say one of your biggest is that so far that you could think of?
Sure, I think it's a good question. And I do agree that with the failures is really important. And sometimes we fail and we make a mistake, but we get lucky. Because maybe it's something that doesn't really cost us money to fix, or something that like we noticed it and it happened, but then it was fine. And I'm always so grateful when I get these, I call them free lessons, right? But I do have one example off the top of my head of an expensive failure which was probably 5 years ago. So I was working with a couple to do their estate plan, and they're not married, but they live together. They act as a married couple, but they never formally got married. So when they wanted to do their own separate living trusts, without getting into too much detail about how it works, the way I created the grant deed to go into the two trusts triggered something with Napa County Assessor's Office that increased the property taxes significantly. So I scrambled and I called the county and I researched it and I said, what can we do to fix this? And the county said, well, we will allow you to basically undo the transaction. They call it a rescission deed. So I prepared the rescission deed for the client, did all that. We recorded it even the next day. Like, we moved quickly, which is something I always do when there's a mistake. I just put all my energy on to fixing it. So the bad news was that even though we rescinded the grant deed and the county accepted it, and we went back to the way it was, the way the property taxes work was essentially for 18 months of property taxes, they were going to count it at this new higher amount. So it ended up being like a $3,500 mess up. And I told the clients, I was honest, we fixed it. And I remember just writing a check for $3,500 to them. And I was like, oh, this is painful. But your point is, did you learn a lesson from that? I absolutely did. I learned that joint tenancy grant deeds are really complicated, and you have to be very careful with how you deal with it because of all the specific nuances when you're dealing with that. So it's a good lesson. I haven't made the mistake since.
You want to know what a big mistake we've made? And we've made multiple mistakes, but one of the biggest mistakes we made, and this goes directly related to what you do, one of our biggest projects we took on, we didn't have a contract in place, a business contract. So I said, let me go online, type something up quick, new construction, boom, put it up. And I read through it, but not in enough detail to have like all the specifics in there. And the end of that project, we basically ended up on bad terms. And then we go, okay, well, let's look into the contract now. And that's where we started breaking up the contract. And we're like, wow, like this was a really bad contract for us, and specifically the size of this project. So, but what did that teach us? To get rid of that contract and pay an attorney to help us develop a proper contract with, us being the party that benefits in that contract.
Yeah, contracts are tricky. Sometimes clients want me to like prepare or improve a contract. I don't really do so much stuff like that, just because of it's a very small scale type of job, and we typically take on larger jobs. But contracts are hard because usually it's like a business owner that comes to you and they'll say, we want this to be bulletproof. We want this to be super tight. We want this term to protect us and this and that. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's the legal part. But you have to wear the other hat, which is, as a business owner now, how is this going to look to your potential client or customer when they're looking at this? How much is this going to turn them off? Are you going to potentially lose business because this contract is so draconianly in favor of you guys that it looks terrible, right? So it is hard, and sometimes that's the guidance that you have to give as an attorney to the client, which is, yeah, this is all going to benefit you in the event of any of these possible scenarios, but is it a smart business decision? So I try to tell clients sometimes to be fair to yourselves, be fair to your clients, and that was one of the things that my mentor taught me all those years back then. One thing that he used to do every Friday morning, it's funny because he wasn't even my employer. He was just an attorney who had been practicing for 30 years. And just because he was so nice, he decided to take me under his wing, right? With no expectation of anything in return. So he would make me meet every Friday morning at 8 o'clock. And this was kind of old school. We'd have this sheet, and I'd write out each case that I was working on, and he'd make me go over like what happened last week and what are the next steps or what are the issues that we need to deal with. And he used to tell me all the time, we'd also go over the billing sheets because attorneys traditionally have charged by the hour, and it can be as increments of like 0.1, which is 6 minutes. And basically, every 6 minutes, you're getting charged, right, for work. So we'd review these bills. It's called the pre-bill review because that's one of the most important documents that a lawyer ever has with his client, because clients will go through an itemized invoice with, very closely. And he would just have this very simple thing that he would say, be fair to yourself, be fair to the client. And what he meant by that was, since I was a new attorney, if I spent an hour doing something that an attorney should have been able to do in 15 minutes, he'd say, you can't charge an hour. That's not fair, right? You need to charge what someone who is good at what they're doing should be charging. They're not paying you to learn. That's not fair. So I used to have to X out so much time that I was working on, and maybe I spent 8 hours working one day and I might only be able to bill an hour for it at the beginning. So that teaches you to be efficient with your time.
Yeah, it's kind of something along the lines of what happens with us too. Sometimes we do things that should have been done faster, and it's like, can't bill your client if you made an error and it took you 8 hours when you should have done it in 2. So yeah, we follow the same rules, and being fair, it's and sometimes we forget to add something in the contract or in the scope of work, and we're like, we have to do this now. Do we go back and tell the client, hey, we forgot to add this, or do we just do it? And a lot of times it's a really difficult decision if it's an expensive decision.
I think it's interesting that made me think of a scenario that happens a lot, which is, and by the way, in 2018, we completely shifted how we do our billings. 95% of what we do is fixed fee projects. Now, I hate doing hourly billing. I'd rather just focus on doing the work, like agreeing ahead of time. This is going to be a $5,000 project, and if it takes me 2 weeks, takes me 3 days, it doesn't matter. But I don't have to spend each day like going through my time and checking emails and all this other stuff. And I totally forgot where I was going with that.
Because we do the same thing. So we can bill time and materials or lump sum fee. And most of the time we do not want to be tracking everything we do. We don't want to have a report of every single thing we did along with the hours. And so we do, that's why we don't do time and materials unless it's something we don't know. Like unless we open a wall up. And even then, sometimes we'll just say like, we're going to open this wall up, but we find something, but it'll be this much to fix it, because we already know the cost of labor and materials. But there is certain times where it's beneficial for us because we really don't know how long it will take to repair something. If we're opening walls, for example, then like you don't know what you're going to be finding along that whole process. But yeah, it's we'd rather do lump sum payment, fee payment for us, so we don't have to track all that. It's a lot of work, and
it allows you to benefit from your own expertise in getting the job done more efficiently. Right? One of the issues with the hourly billing is there's a conflict of interest inherently. Like if I take longer, if I create delays, I get paid more. Whereas with the fixed fees, it's like, no, I've developed an expertise. I've developed an internal process. I have the team in place, whatever it is, to get this project done well and quickly. And that's ultimately what you're paying for. And actually, I remember what I was going to say earlier, which was we always outline what the work's going to be. So let's say I'm doing an estate plan for someone and they want me to do a will and a medical health care directive. Well, a lot of times the clients will they'll change what they want after they've already signed the contract and we've agreed on the price, and they'll say, oh, well, can you also include this? And sometimes they do it intentionally, and sometimes they just they assumed that it was going to be included and they don't know. So that's when us as business owners, we have to decide. am I going to create a change order, go through even the administrative process for something that maybe is not going to net me that much more money anyways? Or am I just going to do it and eat the money for doing the extra work that I'm not getting paid for? So I had another business mentor that used to tell me all the time, it's great to do favors for people, and it's great to do nice things for people, and usually it comes back to you anyways. Just make sure that they know. So applied to what I do, which is I'll say, by the way, this wasn't actually included in the contract, but I'm happy to do it free of charge. Right? So we make those decisions all the time for goodwill. And I think that's so important, especially in a community like Napa, where like everyone talks, right? It's still this old school network. And I actually have had this conversation with other people. I think it's really important for local business owners that have ties to this community, because it keeps us accountable. And it actually, it increases the quality of the work that we all do, knowing that no matter what we do, within 10 minutes, somehow a neighbor knows, the friend knows, our cousin knows, like the families know, our best friends calling us about it. So we have to be on our toes, but it keeps us, doing good work and being honest.
Some serious accountability. Yeah, especially in small towns. In a big city, I mean, if you're in a huge city, it's unlikely that that everyone in the whole city is going to find out anything. But yeah, in a small town, I never really thought about that. But we do know that. I never really thought like, oh, that this can expand to everyone, but we just know that. So we try to give more value than what we're paid for. Always. That's our goal. So you practice here in Napa County, or just Napa City?
So Napa County, there's 58 counties in California, and with my license, I can technically do work in all 58. Before COVID happened, 95% of what I did was in Napa County, especially mostly in the city of Napa, but American Canyon, St. Helena, Calistoga, those areas didn't necessarily have the same quantity or quality of professional services available to them. So a lot of times they would come to Napa, right? Because we're the big city, right? So they go to the big city for those kind of things. When COVID happened, mostly with the help of my wife, Valentina, because she's really good she's kind of the visionary, the long-term thinking, putting procedures and systems in place. She was like, look, now with remote technology, if we pivot quickly and we start using this, we can scale more quickly. And we're not limited to Napa anymore. We could technically market and serve anybody within the state of California, because we have a California license and we're governed by a California probate code for what we do, especially in the estate world. So we have since we've been able to serve people in San Diego County, LA County, Central Valley, up north all the way to Oregon, and we can do it remotely through video calls, phone calls. We do all the work. We send them electronic copies to review everything. And then at the very end, there's basically two options, which is, hey, if you guys want to ever make a trip to Napa, we can schedule a signing with our notary public, which I prefer, by the way, because I'm a little bit OCD, and you want to be able to control, make sure that all the documents get signed and witnessed and notarized correctly, because they don't want the liability of maybe something is invalid because they didn't do it correct. Or we can flag all the documents, prepare it in a binder with instructions, and ship it to the person, and then they just have to go get a witness and a notary. But that's been pretty cool, and I haven't really put that into motion yet, as far as a ground game where I'm gonna focus on marketing and spending resources to try to go scale. But the numbers are staggering. It's 38 million people versus 130,000, right, in Napa County. I don't know what the math is, but that's probably, let's see, 400 times as many people, almost 300 times as many people that you can be serving out there. So that's maybe next year, I'll start focusing more on that. I don't know if this is specific to Napa County, But we also do have an aging population, and kind of the baby boomer generation is very present here, and they're very old school. And I am a people pleaser by nature, blessing and a curse. And I get a lot of pushback from people, not too much, but maybe 10%, 20% of callers that are like, I want to come in. Not only do I want to come in, I have to come in person and sit down and see you in 3 dimensions and all this stuff to be able to do business with you. And we had to make a really difficult decision to just stick to the long-term plan, which was being able to build this out remotely and be able to do things, even if it's people that are in Napa. We're still doing our initial consultations by video call now or by phone call, and it kind of rubs people the wrong way. And sometimes it gives us negative feedback, and it hurts and it sucks, but you got to do it. And the reason why you have to do it, because last year, my wife and my 2 daughters and we spent a month in Spain and in Italy, and I continued to work there remotely. And that was exactly the kind of life that we're trying to build for ourselves, which is have the business, be able to work in the business, but also be able to do other things while you're not physically be tied to being in Napa. Because as soon as I start accepting in-person things, now I physically have to be in Napa, and I can't be somewhere else.
Why did you choose the specific area in law that you work in? What made you or explain what that is, specifically what you do? For example, if I'm a business owner, what would you help me with? Or if I'm, going through a situation where I need to put my property in a trust now, just give a little more details on what the point of that is and how why would I need to do that?
So I guess I'll start with, I think the numbers would bear out that 80% of our revenue comes in through our estate's practice. So estate planning and estate administration can generally be described as the process of planning the transfer and succession of somebody's assets while they're alive. That would be estate planning. And we look at the best way to transfer assets, the most economical, efficient way, tax beneficial ways to maximize wealth and transfer to next generation, for example. And then also dealing with after somebody dies. Okay, well now there's a legal process that needs to play out. And a lot of that is guided by the documents and the plan that the individual either had or didn't have, and then dealing with that. And I think initially what led me to this area of law was, like we talked about earlier, knowing what things we don't like and just failing better, as they say, and knowing, feeling the pain of the situations that you just don't enjoy doing. And that became very apparent early on. Part of it was because of my, like I said, a people pleaser personality. So what type of law would that not be consistent with? Divorce law, dealing with 2 spouses that are fighting and with kids in the middle, and you've got attorneys on the other side that are sending you nasty messages and threatening to do this and go to court. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really like conflict. I don't like any of that stuff. I'd rather use my strengths. My strengths are communicating and connecting with people. That human element, kind of being able to be creative and cerebral with how I analyze a problem and develop a solution for them. And that's kind of what the estate planning is, which is, okay, let me research what all the assets are. Let's look at the properties, the business interests, the retirement accounts, the bank accounts, other things. Let me look at how the law is. Let me kind of delve into the family dynamics too, because that's another variable that's very important. Let me be able to ask questions, because I love asking questions. Tell me about the kids. Tell me about their personalities. Do they get along with each other? Does one kid maybe want to run the business? Is there another kid that maybe is living at the property that we need to take a look at? How do you want to organize all these things and come up with a solution? But it's different than litigation where it's two parties are in conflict over a legal dispute, let's say. Now it's husband and wife hire me collectively, and now we're collaborating. To me, that just feels so much better, and it's much more my sweet spot. So that's how I ended up specializing in that, and I think ultimately being good at that.
That seems like less stress too. I mean, I'm sure there's people that love to argue and love to be in courts with conflict and being nasty and getting things done that way, but I'm sure it's way less stressful this way.
It is, and I think the third prong of my personality that was like threw me over the edge was just being really sensitive in general, like even emotionally. So what I would do is, if I was dealing with, whether it was a criminal defense case that was maybe going to go to trial, or neighbors that were fighting, or the divorcing that was happening, I was taking it home. And you start thinking about it, and then guess what happens? You get an email at 9:45 p.m. from the attorney on the other side saying that, my client is terrible, and what am I doing? I'm unethical, and they're going to take me to court, and I'm going to get sanctions, and I'm going to lose my life. I mean, all this stuff. And I'm like, now I can't even use my phone, right? Because now I keep checking my emails, and I'm in the shower getting ready for work, and I'm thinking about it. And guess what I can't do when I'm in the shower thinking about this case? I can't bill for that. What are you going to put on the bill? Thinking about and dwelling on matter, 1 hour. So it was just like, that was just something that I really, really detested. And that was very clear early on. And in the law, we've got litigation and transactional law. So I was like, I know I'm going to be a transactional lawyer. Let's find something that I enjoy doing that's non-confrontational.
And then on the business side, you help everyone from businesses that are just starting to people that are exiting businesses. Can you explain a little bit of that process and how you help within those areas?
Yeah. So if you are a new business, or even a business that's been in existence for a while, but you're ready to incorporate formally as an entity that's registered with the Secretary of State, that's something that I can help someone with. And there's benefits to that, primarily liability benefits. So any mistakes, errors, liabilities that arise in the course of the business's scope and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, then whoever the plaintiff or the damaged party is can only go after the assets of the business. So what it does is it creates a separate entity from the business, and the owner of the business is no longer personally liable. So they can't go after their home, can't go after their rental properties or their personal assets in the event that there's something that happens with their business. So that's the liability benefit of a corporation, an LLC. And then there's also some tax benefits that you can have as well. A little more complicated, but just a quick example. If you choose to be taxed as an S corporation, then you can creatively structure the way the revenue is paid out to the shareholders by putting the shareholders on payroll and giving them maybe a slightly suppressed wage as an employee, and then taking out the balance of the money as dividends, profit, distributions as a shareholder, because the profits are not subject to self-employment tax, whereas the wages are. So there are some rules, some strategies, some nuance that usually a CPA is also involved in that process. But I enjoy that too. So, and there's that at the beginning. At the end, there's either purchasing or selling a business. And then there's everything in between. I refer to that as general counsel. So if a small business wants me to kind of be available to them to help guide them or review things or even just consult, then usually I'll just take some retainer. Like maybe I'll say, $2,500 or $5,000, and we'll just kind of put that in the bank. And then as needed, they can reach out to me. We can set up a call. Maybe they only use an hour. So then I'll mark off an hour, and they'll still have $4,600 left kind of in their retainer.
That's nice. I think we need to set that up soon. But
So it's not a bad idea. And one of the benefits is that once you have the attorney on retainer, it speeds up the help, because if you wait till there's an issue and then you have to contact the attorney, set up a consultation, do all that stuff, and maybe by the time you're able to have a call, maybe it's a couple weeks later. It's almost like getting a line of credit at the bank. They say do it when everything's good, and not when you're actually having a problem, when you need cash, because that's when it's going to be the hardest to qualify and get the money. So sometimes it makes sense to just get the attorney on retainer when you don't have any issues, so that they're available if something pops up.
that's definitely never really think about that. You don't think about, I need to have an attorney on retainer for when anything comes up. You just think, what, I'll deal with it when it comes up. I'll hire someone when it comes up. But that's super smart to do. Just find someone you can work with that you like, put the retainer on there, and just now you have faster access to solve your problems.
And I know for us right now, I mean, it's a curse and a blessing, but I have another partner. So there's two attorneys right now, and actually next year we'll be adding a third. So that's exciting. And right now, if you call in, you want to get an appointment for initial consultation to introduce and talk about the matter and go all, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 4 weeks. Which is great. We're in high demand. That's why we're going to be adding a third attorney soon. But I've got to think it's like that at a lot of good lawyers, where it might take a few weeks in order to actually get in and have a formal consultation. Not as bad as a dentist, which I think is like, it's like we can see you in 2029.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure my tooth will have fallen out by then, but thank you.
Yeah, I needed a cleaning done. They're like, we'll see you in 2 years.
Like you come in all just nasty. Like, I'm so sorry.
It's been 2 years, But yeah, what do you see the most, or what do you see most of here in the Napa area? What are like majority of things you deal with in the Napa area?
So I will say specifically something that's kind of cool, at least in the estate planning world, is there is a lot more wealth amassed amongst our Latino community than I ever realized. And I know that because a lot of them come to me to help set up their own wills and trusts. Because I don't know if we talked about this, but as you know, I'm fluent in Spanish, and I don't know for a fact that I'm the only one, but there's probably just a couple that specifically do estate planning in Napa. I may be the only one, I don't know. So that's a big part of what I do. It makes it one of my favorite things, because I like to ask so many questions. I like to learn about where people came from. So I'll just ask all these questions about like where they're from and what's their story and how did they get here, and oh, by the way, how did you end up with 5 rental properties that are all paid off? And they'll say like, oh, I was a bracero, or like, I worked in the field for 45 years. And I'm like, how did you do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like being smart with money, saving, family values, where they all pitch in together. And one thing that I think the Latino community did really well here was they started purchasing real estate in Napa in the 70s and 80s, when it was $59,000 to buy a house or whatever it was. And then they started saving up money, and maybe the original one went well. And then they were like, hey, we've got some money saved up. Let's go get a down payment on a second property. And then before you knew it, they were selling that one and buying up, and selling another one, buying up. And now they've got a duplex and a triplex. And it's amazing. And there's so many great entrepreneurs as well in Napa. So to kind of answer your question, like, what do I see a lot here? My favorite A+ client is a small business owner that is also a property owner. And it's something that I enjoy doing, and it's also something that often turns into two separate avenues of business for me. Because if we hit it off and we have a good relationship, then I can help them with their business, and I can also help them with their estate.
It's awesome, and that's good to know that you also can, and you speak very fluently. So, ¿dónde aprendiste a hablar español?
A ver, creo que por un lado en la escuela, aquí en high school, es cuando empecé. Luego en la universidad hice muchos cursos. Fue una especialización mía, una de las 2 carreras que hice. Y luego creo que lo perfeccioné o lo mejoré mucho viviendo en España. Hice 1 año allá y, bueno, ya sabes, después de como 4 o 5 meses que estás en un país en el cual no puedes usar el inglés, que por cierto, los españoles tienen un inglés pésimo, empiezas a soñar en español, empiezas a pensar y no traducir. Y de allí, cuando estaba trabajando en el béisbol con los peloteros como de Venezuela, de República Dominicana, fue necesario porque ellos tampoco hablaban inglés. Entonces también aprendí a utilizarlo de una manera y tuve que aprender la terminología jurídica, legal, como para hablar de testamentos, fideicomisos, cosas así, y es como otro vocabulario, ¿no?
That's awesome. Yeah, so I mean that's a huge advantage I think you have over, and I don't think there's too many Spanish speaking attorneys that can help that large population. So it's great to know, and anyone that knows someone that maybe a majority just speaks Spanish, you can help them and guide them through the whole process, which is amazing to be able to tackle that. It's just like a whole nother business basically that you have that you can help a whole another clientele. What do you see what do you see the future of law turning into? Like, how do you see law changing in the next 10, 15 years?
I think like most industries, it's going to heavily turn on AI. I think that's going to be a big source. I think we're going to have to learn to coexist with AI. I'm not afraid of that. I'm actually starting to think of ways that I can use it to enhance the experience of our clients, and also to enhance the way we do things and the way we provide service. Because if I have more access to information, then I can creatively use prompts to get the right information or to create a strategy for my client using AI, and then go back and funnel it through and make sure that it complies with the appropriate laws. I think it's just going to make me better. So maybe it'll force some of the older attorneys to consider leaving the profession if it becomes a really big deal, and then we'll be ready to jump on it and use it to our advantage. I'm not worried about it. I see it as an opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, just same with us. We see it, and for us, it's a little less concerning because eventually we'll get there where we'll have robots building and doing all this work. But it's definitely helpful in a lot of areas, and I think if we can focus on using technology to help us focus on more creative things, or just implement whatever we're doing faster. And for example, I know in AI, you can probably upload 2 contracts and break it down and tell me, X, Y, Z, or what are the outcomes, or what are some different alternatives, and it'll spit out all that data.
Yeah. And
you can even set it up to research, probably hey, look at this contract and research this type of law, see what are some conflicts. It can get really helpful for especially you, probably what you do, and like you said, drafting up some contracts maybe, and then going back and reviewing it.
Makes me better. The only caveat is that there are 1 out of 10 or whatever where it'll it'll reference some law like from Canada or something, it's something funky. So our job, because of our liability and our responsibility, is to go through that even with a fine-tooth comb. But ultimately, I think what it does is it's a really good idea generator.
Sick.
All right, Trevor, and where would people be able to find you if they need to book one of your services in the real estate world, in the business world, or whatever it is? Where would people go to find you, and where can they contact you?
So I guess it depends on people's preferences for communication. If you want to just call us, you can book a consultation that way. 707-681-5851. Online, www.mynapalawyer.com. My Napa Lawyer is also our tag on Instagram and Facebook. And last thing I'll say on that is every Wednesday, we try to keep our social media content updated fairly frequently. And one of the things that we do is every Wednesday, we will take a common question that we receive from clients, and we'll give a question and answer on our social media for people to see. So if you're ever looking for that kind of content, we do that too. We call it Wednesday Wisdom.
That's awesome. Have you? You should look into going live. That'd be cool too. Like where you can just answer random questions for people.
I know. I think that's probably the scariest part about that, which I don't know if my malpractice insurance probably wouldn't like me giving all the advice on the spot, but that would be fun to do.
Well, thank you for coming, Trevor. And you guys know where to find Trevor. And that wraps up our show today.
Thank you, Carlos.